My husband thinks he does nothing wrong, but does these 10 things. What can I do? My husband thinks he does nothing wrong, but he doesn't want to hear me out and consider things from my perspective. Can you relate to the sentence? Has your marriage hit a rough patch? Maybe your husband isn't even aware of it, but you definitely think that things could be better. If so, you should know that you're not the only married woman who feels this way. In fact, most wives would say the same. Even my husband thinks he does nothing wrong whenever I point out something he could have done differently. Most hubbies don't want to accept responsibility for their mistakes and just focus on being blamed for something. Fortunately for most of us, it's enough to have a heart-to-heart chat to solve this problem. If that doesn't help, there's always marriage counseling. The truth is, even the happiest marriages go through a rocky period at some point. As long as you still care about each other and have the desire to work on your relationship, there's always hope. Sadly, sometimes people end up in a marriage with the wrong person or stop loving each other. The man you used to know and love could change and become toxic. Hopefully, this is not the case in your marriage, but it does happen. This is why it's important to know when to keep trying and when to give up. I'll mention the situations that might have led you to say, "My husband thinks he does nothing wrong" conclusion. Maybe he cuts you off, doesn't want to hear your opinions, refuses to listen, or dominates every conversation. Whatever it is, you can learn how to deal with it, and I'm here to help you. Maybe he thinks he's always right and blames you for everything bad that happens. If he tends to talk down to you, he's insecure, can't see your point of view, and might even have a temper problem. This is why if you're sure your husband thinks he does nothing wrong, you shouldn't ignore the feeling. There's a reason you came to this conclusion, and we need to get to the bottom of it. Maybe he just has some annoying traits, but it could also be a big deal. Whenever you notice a problem in your marriage, even if it's a small one, you need to work on fixing it. After all, this is the person you intend on spending the rest of your life with. You can't tolerate bad behavior now if you don't want to keep tolerating it in the future. Not having enough patience to see both sides of the coin can lead to much bigger problems. What can I do if my husband thinks he's done nothing wrong? If this question is bothering you, you'll now find out the answers. I'm about to tell you some of the scenarios that you might be having trouble with within your marriage. Number 1, he blames me for everything. When your child isn't doing great at school, it's your fault for not devoting enough time to them. Or is it? When you're tired because you worked late, it's because you don't know how to manage your time. Really? It seems like every problem is somehow your fault, at least according to your husband. You know that this is disrespectful and not at all true, right? It's just a sign of toxic behavior that might have been there all along, but you chose to ignore it. Your husband needs to know that he can't blame you for everything bad that happens. There needs to be some boundaries in a relationship. Don't let him put the blame on you when you've clearly done nothing wrong. Try talking to him about it and suggest counseling if it doesn't work. Make sure to demand respect and make it clear that you're not going to tolerate his false accusations. Number 2, I always try to please him, but he doesn't do anything for me. Maybe your husband is lazy and feels entitled, so he expects you to do everything for him. This often happens in a marriage where the wife also thinks that she's the one who needs to do everything. Once she realizes how unfair this is, she suddenly becomes aware of how big an issue it actually is. Marriage isn't about keeping score, but in this case, it's a good idea to do just that. Make a list of everything you do and try to make one of what your husband does for you. Is it obvious that you're not getting anything in return while doing your best to make him happy? It's not okay and it needs to stop. Talk to him and stop doing the things you used to do that he can do by himself. Do you always iron his shirts? Show him how to iron them himself. Does he not make you tea or chicken soup when you're feeling sick? Ask him to, especially if you usually do that for him. The point is to stop him from expecting you to do everything and teach him that he needs to do things too. Number 3, he manipulates me into thinking I owe him. Your husband occasionally does nice things for you, but when he does, he expects something in return. It seems like he can't do anything simply out of love, and every single thing he does comes at a price. Say he does a certain household chore instead of you. Sounds nice, but then he expects a medal for it. My friend had a similar problem. My husband thinks he does nothing wrong. He rubs it in my face that, wow, he did the dishes weeks ago. And the scary thing is, she's not the only one. I heard similar complaints from a lot of women. It seems like men always expect something in return when they do nice things for us. This makes you feel like you owe him something for simply taking out the trash without being asked to do so. You need to understand that you don't owe your husband anything for the nice things he does. He's supposed to do them because that's how a marriage works, at least a happy one. You don't need to let him watch the game just because he brought you flowers to make you let him. If your husband manipulates you into thinking you owe him something, it's not okay. When he does something around the house instead of you, thank him, but don't give him a reward for it. After all, you don't have to do it either, and you do anyway, so wear your medals. Don't ever let him trick you into doing something you don't want to do just because you feel like you owe him. Number 4. He accuses me of being in a bad mood when he's the one who's actually mad. My husband thinks he does nothing wrong when he projects his feelings onto me. Is this something you can relate to? Let me explain what I mean. Your husband had a bad day and he came home anxious, nervous, and cranky. Once you asked him what's wrong, the man went bananas. He got really angry and even accused you of being the one who's flipping her lid. You probably even believed him. What actually happened is that he projected his emotions onto you because he can't own them. It makes you act defensively and feel like you need to apologize. But wait, what are you apologizing for? For letting him make you feel like you're the problem and that you're unfair to him? That's some twisted manipulation. He needs to learn to handle his emotions without projecting them onto you. When he tells you that you're the one who's in a bad mood, stop for a second before defending yourself. Consider whether that is true or not before you do anything else. If it's not, stay calm and tell him that you're actually feeling completely at ease. Let him know that you don't understand what he's accusing you of. Be completely calm while you do this, and it will confuse him. He'll explode with emotion, and it will be perfectly clear who's actually angry. Number 5. He's always emotionally blackmailing me. Your husband makes you choose between someone else and him, but he doesn't really give you a choice, does he? You must choose him, so it's actually blackmail, not a choice. Maybe you have a male friend and he forbids you from seeing him because he's jealous due to his trust issues. Let's see whether this describes your problem. My husband thinks he does nothing wrong when he forbids me to spend time with a guy friend, and when I disobey him, he acts like a drama queen. He forces you to do whatever he says if you don't want to suffer the consequences. Okay, maybe we can let the unreasonable jealousy slide, but it doesn't end with that, does it? Maybe your situation doesn't have anything to do with some other man. Instead, your husband tells you to do something for him if you want him to go to counseling with you. Or perhaps he says that you'd give him your passwords if you truly trusted him. It doesn't really matter what he's blackmailing you about. The point is that he shouldn't blackmail you in the first place. Don't give him such control over your life. Your husband can't make you do things you don't want to. No one can. Being married doesn't mean that you can't text a guy friend. If you're clearly not cheating on your husband, he has no right to forbid you from communicating with other men. But even if my husband thinks he does nothing wrong, he just doesn't want anyone to steal me away from him, right? You're not some sort of item that can be stolen against her own will. He doesn't know that he's doing something wrong. Actually, he probably knows very well what he's doing, pushing your boundaries. If you have nothing to feel guilty about, don't let him make you, and never tolerate emotional blackmail. Number 6. He focuses on the tone of my voice instead of on the issue that caused it. Whenever my husband thinks he does nothing wrong, I remind him of this situation. Trying to talk about a certain issue was very difficult when he would just focus on my tone of voice. Sure, things can get heated when you're talking about something that bothers you, but the point you're trying to make can't be ignored just because you've used a certain tone. Focus on something so irrelevant is simply evasive. He wants to avoid the topic, so he makes you apologize for the tone you used while talking about it. The truth is, he's not actually that bothered by the tone of your voice. He just doesn't want to deal with the problem. You have nothing to apologize for, and even if you do, there's a more serious matter at hand. Stay on topic, and don't let him change it just because you used a certain tone. Stand your ground and remind yourself that he just wants to get out of a tough situation. Dealing with difficult stuff is a part of a marriage, and he can't avoid it. Don't let him make you stray off topic or confuse you. You don't need to justify yourself when you're trying to talk about something that's been bothering you. I try to keep a calm voice when talking about issues, but when my husband thinks he does nothing wrong, I remind him that avoiding the issue is actually wrong. Number 7. He's incapable of apologizing. Maybe your husband never says he's sorry when he does something wrong. Instead, he makes you feel crazy for even wanting him to apologize. What's the big deal, right? Well, not being able to say you're sorry when you have something to be sorry about is a big deal. People feel the need to apologize when they do something wrong. When you hurt someone who loves you, the least you can do is apologize to them. If your husband can't do that, he doesn't truly care about your feelings. He doesn't appreciate you and maybe even thinks that you'll just put up with whatever he does. Everyone needs to take responsibility for their actions, and your husband is no exception. He seems to care much more about his own pride than about being fair to you. If he can't give you a genuine apology, it's unacceptable. Let him see how it feels. When he does something wrong, go out with your friends and have fun the whole night. Don't explain yourself to him when you come home and see him waiting for you. He'll expect an apology for making him stay up and worry about you. That's when you can remind him that he actually owes you an apology. Tell him that you assumed you don't need to apologize since he never does it. Number 8. He doesn't respond to my messages or calls. The two of you were texting and things might have gotten heated, so he stopped responding. You were discussing something very important to you, so this left you speechless. The problem is, it started happening a lot more often than it should. Whenever a conversation gets uncomfortable, he leaves it unfinished. Afterward, he doesn't answer your calls. Texting back takes just a minute, so he's definitely not that busy. These days, everyone checks their phone every 5 minutes, so how could he not see your text? If he tends to leave you hanging when you want to text him, let him be on the receiving end for once. Don't respond to his texts, don't answer his calls. I bet he won't like it either. Sometimes you just have to give someone a taste of their own medicine to get them to understand you. When your husband ignores you, show him what it feels like to be ignored. Number 9. He purposely judges me. When he doesn't approve of something you did, he hurts your self-esteem. The truth is, we all make mistakes because as humans, we're not perfect. Yes, you have flaws, but so does he. He has no right to make you feel unworthy, judged, or insecure just because you made a mistake. What kind of person would do that anyway? If you're trying to justify him by saying, "My husband thinks he does nothing wrong," stop. He's definitely doing something wrong, and it's highly unlikely that he's not aware of it. A man who loves you shouldn't put you down. Instead, he should be your rock. He can't judge your choices or make you feel like you're not good enough just because you've made a mistake. Your husband isn't perfect either, and he should love you with all of your shortcomings and flaws. He needs to support you and help you instead of judge you, especially when something bad happens. You already feel bad about the mistake you've made, so why would he make you feel even worse? He's supposed to comfort you and make you feel better. Together, you could find a way to fix whatever went wrong. Your mistakes don't define you, and your man should make you feel like they do. He's simply being mean to you instead of being your safe haven. Number 10. He has crazy mood swings. Yesterday, he was the sweetest man in the world, but today, you have to walk on eggshells not to upset him. One day, he's your best friend who showers you with affection. The next, he's a narcissist who knocks your self-esteem to the ground. The change just somehow happens without any warning. The worst part of it is that you never know which version of your husband is going to come home. This leaves you scared because you can't predict anything. You feel like he could promise you eternity one day and simply walk out on you the next. It's like he has different personalities, and you never know which one you're going to face when you wake up. You never know for sure whether he's frustrated, happy, cheerful, or annoyed. He doesn't want to talk about his feelings, so you just have to guess how he'll react whenever you want to tell him something. You probably make excuses for him, but you know that you won't be able to take it much longer. All you want is to make your husband happy, but he's just throwing tantrums and your mental health is suffering the consequences. Keep away from him when he's in a bad mood. Once he's normal again, sit down and have a serious conversation with him. If you can't communicate properly and he refuses to seek help, there's not much you can do. You can't tolerate these awful mood swings though. If he's not willing to work on himself and talk to you about it, you have no choice but to walk away. This is especially true if you see the signs your husband hates you. Don't keep telling yourself, "My husband thinks he does nothing wrong," because that might not even be true. He might be perfectly aware of the things he does is wrong. But even if he isn't, he still did something wrong, and you can't let him act like he didn't. Stand up for yourself and don't let anyone mistreat you. You deserve better, especially from your husband.